Previously on Ace Attorney Investigations! Gumshoe here! I may have only been in that episode for 60 seconds, but I can still do the recap! I informed Mr. Edgeworth that the missing Blue Badger costume had been found, and with evidence stacked against her, Lauren Paups admitted to being the kidnapper. Before Lang gave the arrest order, Edgeworth had a battle of wits with him to prove that she wasn't the culprit. However, that mostly consisted of him throwing out random objections and at one point just sitting around and doing nothing. It was almost as if Mr. Edgeworth was being controlled by an idiot who didn't know how to play video games. No offense, Peter.
No problem, gumshit.
Long story short, Lauren Paups and Oliver Deacon were actually related, and Lance Amano conducted his own kidnapping. Just then, Lauren dropped this bombshell on us.
I just killed my own father!
Well, shit! Find out what happens on Ace Attorney Investigations! Next!
Lolly! Then it really was you.
That man was not my father! I mean, because at the stadium, there was a bad badger pulling the suitcase with the $1 million in it. But that badger pointed his gun at me, aiming to shoot me dead! That's why I used the gun I got from Lance. There was a gunshot, the other person crumpled to the ground, and I ran, scared for my life.
I think the big picture's finally coming into focus, don't you?
Lolly, forgive me. I didn't think it would turn into something so frightening. If only I could have protected you!
So, Miss Paups, she shot her own dad without even knowing who he really was?
If what she says is true.
Are you saying she's lying? But why would she lie about something like that? What purpose would it serve?
You'd be surprised how often people lie without even realizing it themselves, Kay.
Huh? What's that supposed to mean?
What I mean is, listen very carefully to her confession once more and you'll see.
It's rebuttal time! Okay, Mr. Edgeworth, you can do this. Just focus.
Hold it! Were you able to clearly see the gun?
Yes, I got a very good look at it while it was pointed at me. Oh, Father, why would you try to shoot me?
Do you really think a father would shoot his own daughter, Mr. Edgeworth?
I don't know.
I don't want to believe it myself.
But it's true! My father's left arm was raised with a gun in it. Pointed straight at me. I'm about to die, I thought.
Miss Paups! Please, calm down and take a deep breath. And then, would you allow me to please hear that last statement one more time?
Yes, of course.
This piece of testimony is rather illuminating.
You know, Mr. Edgeworth, something tells me she's not the killer. I mean, the worst she could do is stab him to death with her ring pop, and that's not exactly a murder weapon.
Let's see. I believe somewhere in here I have the exact piece of evidence I need. Objection! I have here a dossier on your father. And according to this, your father was right-handed.
Then...
The person pointing a gun at you from atop the stage was not Mr. Deacon.
Not so fast! Hold on there, Mr. Prosecutor. I think you need to take a refresher course. The Bad Badger had a model gun attached to his right hand, which is why the only hand he could have held the real gun with was his left. Isn't it possible that it went down like that?
Agent Lang, were you paying attention to what Miss Paups was saying? Then again, I suppose I can't expect someone who has never set foot in court to catch it.
Enough with the smugness. Out with it already.
Miss Paups told us earlier.
There was a bad badger pulling the suitcase with the $1 million in it.
According to you, the Bad Badger had the gun in his left hand, which would mean that he was pulling the suitcase with his right hand. Is that correct, Miss Paups?
Yes, exactly. And I'm sure it was the Bad Badger. It had those huge sunglasses on its face.
But if that's the case, even I can see there's a huge contradiction.
Yes, Miss Paups claims to have seen the Bad Badger. And yet, the Bad Badger had both of his hands full. These two pieces of information contradict each other, so one must be wrong. They are both correct.
Impossible! That just leaves us with an irresolvable contradiction!
Miss Paups' entire statement rests on the fact that she saw his sunglasses and beard. But what if that Bad Badger wasn't wearing pants on his lower half?
So you're saying he's a nudist?
This proves that there was a way for the Bad Badger to freely use both of his hands. Take that! The costumes have two parts to them, a head and the body.
Oh, I get it now!
The head Miss Paups saw was probably really the head of the Bad Badger. However, is it not possible that the body was that of an entirely different badger?
A different badger?
Yes, or to put it more bluntly, I believe it was the lower half of this badger. The body of the Bad Badger Miss Paups saw really belonged to this badger. Huh. It feels like it's been months since I last looked at this brochure. Perhaps... Take that! His head may have been the Bad Badger, but his body was the Blue Badger's.
The Blue Badger? Hold on. Let's see here. Who was it that had one of these
Listen, I
on?
feel like I've lived through this entire day twice already. Cut me some slack. Take that!
What? The heck is it?
It's the Proto-Badger.
Yes, and it's a simple matter of process of elimination. Miss Paups was wearing the Blue Badger's costume, so we can eliminate that one. And the Pink Badger is of the wrong color, which would have been incredibly obvious. All that is left is the Proto-Badger costume. Miss Paups, who was the one who wore the Proto-Badger costume?
That would be Lance.
Not so fast! Are you saying what I think you're saying? That Lance Amano downed the Blue Badger's head and pretended to be Mr. Deacon? On top of which he plotted to shoot Miss Paups while wearing that hideous thing?
The stage that was set up in the stadium was nothing more than that, a setup. And its purpose was to lead Miss Paups into believing she had committed murder. Standing there in front of Miss Paups and pretending to be the victim, it was all done so that she would pull the trigger.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Why exactly would I have had to do that, huh?
There is but one reason. Lance Amano! You are the real culprit behind the murder of Mr. Oliver Deacon!
What?
No!
That's slander! Take it back! You take it back right now!
Just out of curiosity, Lance, which is your dominant hand?
I'm left-handed. What does that have to do with anything?
It depends. According to Miss Paups, her attacker held a gun in his left hand.
Not so fast! Ha! Who is what-handed doesn't prove a thing. And besides, now you're just being absurd. It's not like the Proto-Badger is bulletproof. One misfire and he would have found himself dead, right?
Objection! Of course. Logically, if he had been shot, he probably wouldn't be here with us. But I believe he had thought of that as well, and prepared accordingly. And this should be all the evidence you need. This is how Lance made sure that he wouldn't be hit by a bullet. Now, let's see. I think the evidence is in here somewhere. I seem to be losing everything lately, so... No, that's not it. That's definitely not it. Freude schon guter Funken Tochter aus Elysium. Wir betreten... Oh, there it is. Take that! We found one half of a Bad Badger costume in the hideout, a broken one. It was not the same one that the victim was wearing. Plus, it was missing something. And that something is the model gun that the Bad Badger carries, which can fire blanks.
What?
Miss Paups, where is the gun you use now?
I threw it away into the sea.
That makes it a bit tough to verify what it was. Although, I believe that we can safely assume that it was the model gun in question.
Not so fast! I've heard enough. All you've been spouting so far is pure conjecture.
I admit that as long as the model gun is lost to us, I can't prove I'm right. However, I can say that the probability that I am right is very high.
Okay, let's pretend that you're right, and that the murder at the stadium was a fabrication. In that case, where do you think the murder really took place, Mr. Prosecutor?
I don't know yet.
Ha! I knew you were full of it!
However, I do believe that the murder took place during an earlier time frame.
Hold it! Please, wait a second! It's simply not possible! Because I saw Mr. Deacon after he was restrained by Lance!
She saw the victim in the state of being restrained?
I came back to the hideout long after the other two. By that time, Lance had already subdued and restrained Mr. Deacon. He had tied Mr. Deacon securely to the beam in the room next door. After that, the two of us put on our costumes and made our escape.
So Mr. Deacon must have escaped after the two of you left, right?
We thought that it'd attract too much attention if we left together, so I left first. We planned to meet up again at the stage in the stadium. But then, as I was walking through the park, I got a call from Lance on my cell phone.
Oliver managed to escape. It looked like he was waiting until I was alone. He also stole the gun from me at that time.
And then, the murder happened. Mr. Deacon must have overheard their plan to meet up at the stage. Well, Mr. Prosecutor, Miss Paups saw the victim with her own eyes, which means that the victim was still alive at that time. Wouldn't you agree?
Why does that sound wrong to me? There must be something amiss about this account. Let's see what happens when I examine it in more detail. There's something very fishy about this account. If Mr. Deacon was being held in the room next door to them, then... I can already see a contradiction brewing. Hold it! You were sure that it was Mr. Deacon that you saw?
Yes, I'm certain of what I saw.
Did you go into the other room to check?
Lance said that it was best if I didn't get too close to him. Lance, he's such a sweet thing.
Then are you telling me that you did not confirm that it was Mr. Deacon for yourself?
I checked through the slit in the door that separates the two rooms. He had a bad badger's head on, so I'm absolutely sure. That just had to be Mr. Deacon.
She saw a bad badger head? Well, this isn't going to be big on dignity, but needs must if I'm going to prove this contradiction. Objection! Miss Paups, the person you saw was not Mr. Deacon at all.
Huh?
The person you actually saw was this person. It was me.
Huh? The person I saw was you, Mr. Edgeworth?
I always thought it was a bit odd. Why would the kidnappers abduct me, even after I had handed over the ransom? It's not as though I saw the face of the kidnappers. If I were them, I would have just taken the $1 million and ran. But, in the end, there was a point to it all. It was to make me look like Mr. Deacon. And if that was the reason for which I was abducted, then I believe we can assume that the victim was already dead at that time. Well, Lance, am I right? You showed Miss Paups a person, namely me, with a bad badger's head on. And then made your costumed escape together, or so you pretended.
Huh? What do you mean he pretended?
Exactly that. I believe Lance watched you escape and then doubled back to the hideout. Probably to come and remove the Bad Badger head from my unconscious self. And to create his fake prison with the prop sword, he then escaped via the passageway.
Not so fast! Hold your tongue, boy! Don't get caught up in that tidal wave of words coming out of Mr. Prosecutor's mouth.
Tidal wave?
We've heard a lot come out of you, but I've yet to see a shred of evidence. The victim's betrayal and his subsequent detainment. All of that could have happened while you were out cold.
That's right! You were out for quite a while, Mr. Prosecutor.
Even if that were the case, Miss Paups would have still seen me tied to that beam.
I was scared of Mr. Deacon, so I didn't go into the next room. So I really have no idea if you were in there or not, Mr. Edgeworth.
You see, it would seem that you can't prove a thing.
Hold it!
Who said that?
Please, wait.
Mr. Amano.
Miles, my boy, it looks like you're really giving it your all. And Lance, it's not good to cause trouble for others.
Dad?
Let's see. You are the one in charge of the investigation, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sorry that my son has been nothing but trouble. This probably won't make up for anything, but I have some evidence for you.
Oh, do you now?
Is that what I think it is?
I couldn't wait around for the police, so I went and found these myself. It appears that they were disposed of in the sea.
Ah, is there no one in this country who actually obeys the law?
There now. Agent Lang, please calm down.
What the heck is that scrap of paper?
This appears to be a letter from the Chief of Police. Please allow Mr. Amano complete freedom to do as he sees fit, it says.
What?
The Chief of Police? What the? Just who does he think he is?
The person who wields the highest authority in this area.
There now. There is no need to be so upset.
I'm not a cop from this land, so I'm not bound by the laws of your country.
Now. This wasn't meant to strong-arm you into anything, it's just a request. I'm only asking that you please respect the laws of the land.
I can't really say no to that. However, returning to the topic at hand, it doesn't matter who found the evidence. Its value remains unchanged. All right now, let's take a look at this new evidence.
I've already got the results back. I had a special forensics research lab that I'm in good terms with conduct the tests. They verified that the blood on his costume belonged to Oliver. As for the gun, the only fingerprints they could find were yours, Lauren!
What?
You disappoint me, Miles. I can't believe that you would cause my son such stress and heartache! Thank goodness I was able to find the final pieces of evidence. With this, you'll have no reason left to push my poor boy around.
That's it? These are the case-making pieces of evidence? Huh. I'll be the judge of that. I won't rest until I've inspected every suspicious-looking soggy nook and cranny. This bullet hole.
It looks kind of burnt around the edges.
Wait! Those burn marks were left by the gunpowder. This is a most important fact, because it is proof that the victim was shot at point-blank range. There's nothing unusual about this area. What's this? It looks like there's something inside the costume head.
Hey! They sparkle! I call dibs!
Sorry, but they're just pieces of a mirror. But why are they in here?
I guess all that glitters is not gold.
Could this gun be the actual murder weapon?
Well, are these not the most definitive pieces of evidence you've ever seen?
Thank you, Dad. This should be enough to convince even Mr. Edgeworth over there. Make no mistake, there are fingerprints on that murderous gun. And they prove that it was Lolly who killed Oliver. But Oliver was also after Lolly's life. So, Mr. Edgeworth, even you must see that Lolly was only acting in self-defense.
The fingerprints on the weapon, huh?
Oh no! This isn't helpful at all!
Look, Mr. Edgeworth, all I want to do is to save Lolly. But in the end, all I can do is watch on as she takes the punishment for her crimes.
That may be all you can do. However, I still have a case to solve and a job to do. The job of unraveling your insidious lie.
You wound me. Why won't you believe me, even in the face of all this evidence?
Perhaps because you're a smug, selfish little brat and it's obvious that your father is covering for you. Hold it! Those fingerprints, are you sure they belong to Miss Paups?
There's no mistake about it. Through my connections, I had the best forensics techniques money can buy performed.
I find that to be a bit peculiar.
What? Are you trying to pick an argument with me?
What should I do? Should I raise an objection? Frankly, I don't believe that Miss Paups' prints should be on that gun to begin with. And the reason why Miss Paups' print should not be on the gun is, aside from the fact that the gun was soaking wet and that should have washed off any and all prints, is also one other small matter. Take that! Wrong small matter. Take that! It's simply not possible for Miss Paups to have left any prints on the murder weapon. Because while she was at the stadium, Miss Paups was wearing a costume.
But there's been no mistake. We found fingerprints.
Well, Miss Paups, do you remember touching the gun at all at any time?
Yes! As a matter of fact, I did hold it for a bit back in the hideout. I handed it off to Mr. Deacon when he and Lance left for the haunted house.
To retrieve the ransom money, I suppose. And there you have it. That is when Miss Paups' prints found their way onto the gun. Do you understand now, Mr. Amano? The fingerprints do nothing to prove that Miss Paups is the murderer.
But you still don't have anything to prove that she isn't the killer, right?
You seem very adamant about insisting that your girlfriend is a cold-blooded killer.
Lance, what the hell?
What? No way! I'm incredibly worried about her! But that doesn't change the fact that you don't have any evidence, right?
That's where you're wrong. I have the evidence.
What? How?
The story that Miss Paups killed the victim at the stage in the stadium. The whole affair is simply not true, because that was not the real crime scene, but a setup. This proves that the real murder was not committed at the stadium at all. Take that! Let us take another good look at the costume the victim was wearing. Then, I believe you will see why I insist he was not shot at the stadium. This is the part of the costume that proves it. Let's see. I believe that the mirror shard is important, but is it yet time to present it? Take that! No, definitely not time to present that yet. Take that! The burn around this bullet hole was made when the victim was shot at point-blank range.
So then Then you mean the murder Miss Oldbeck saw at the stadium really was...
Yes, she saw two people, but they were separated by a distance. If the victim was indeed shot from below the stage, there shouldn't be a gunpowder burn.
Look at you, Mr. Smarty Pants Prosecutor. Since you seem to know all the details, why not tell us where the real crime scene is then?
Len set me up to look like Mr. Deacon back at the hideout. If that's the case, then the murder must have happened prior to that. And the location where Lance and the victim were at just before I was in prison was... I've got it! I know the real scene of the murder! The real location in which Mr. Deacon was killed is here! Take that! I think it's not unreasonable to assume the murder took place in the haunted house.
The haunted house?
Yes, and I have proof that it is highly likely that the victim was killed there. What proves that the real scene of the crime was the haunted house? Take that! These were inside the costume the victim was wearing. They're fragments of a mirror.
A mirror? And what does that have to do with anything?
Indeed. You don't exactly expect to find pieces of a mirror inside a costume.
Yeah, that's actually pretty dangerous.
However, there is one place I can think of where there is a plethora of mirror fragments. And that is the haunted house. Lance Amano, I propose that you killed Mr. Deacon with the revolver in the haunted house.
Objection! Objection! Hold it! Hold it! Eureka! Take that! Take that! Next time!
You didn't recreate the weapon.
Well, I can't exactly recreate something I know nothing about. Where were you hit?
I was hit on the right side of my head, just above my temple. But that's what makes this deception all the more interesting. He used his right hand to make it look like Mr. Deacon had been the one to strike me.
Oh, how quickly things move when you can prepare $1 million in the blink of an eye.
What? That $1 million you paid? Don't tell me it was...
Let's do Project!